I think when I think about my research trajectory, I'll call it, one of the things that's notable is that I think when I began this work as an academic, I was concerned a lot with the critique. And one of the central features of my work has been understanding the fort as a mythic symbol at the heart of the creation story of Canada. And so part of that insight, I guess, that comes from that is that if you consider the story that's been told in schools for many generations on the genesis of Canada, and I use that word genesis purposefully because it has that sacred kind of connotation to it. This Genesis story, there are certain symbols that are at the heart of that story. In other words, there are certain symbols that support the integrity of that story. And one of the most important ones is the fort. And this insight and its mythic character was actually a gift from our son, who's 22 now. But at the time we were living in Fort Macleod, which is in southern Alberta, and Fort Macleod is part of that mythic story because in Western Canada anyway, what we're taught is that Northwest Mounted Police were sent west from Red River, what we call Winnipeg now, to try and establish peace in what we call southern Alberta now. And so in 1874, they established Fort Macleod in the heart of Blackfoot territory. So this is the place where we lived. And like a lot of places in Canada, Fort Macleod has a fort recreated as a museum. And children are taken there regularly during the school year. But they also, has been a popular tourist site, and it's right along the busy highway there. And one of the things that they do in the summer at Fort Macleod is they recreate the musical ride of the Northwest Mounted Police, where they get on the horses and they do what they do. And they hire local high school students to ride the horses and do this. So when you live in town, they play this really annoying music whenever the horses are doing the musical ride. So you can't avoid it. It's 5 or 6 times a day that they play this music. So this summer that I'm referring to, our son must have been, I think he was 2.5 years old. Whenever he heard the music, he wanted to go check out the horses, and I had to go with him. I got really tired of this. But one night that summer, we were getting ready for bed, and I was helping him put on his pajamas, and he said to me, he said, "Dad, I don't want to be an Indian anymore." It was hard to hear. Still is hard to say. But like most parents, I was pretty good at not overreacting, so I took a deep breath and I sat down on the bed and I said, "Oh, is that right? Why is that?" And he said to me, he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Indians always lose." Yeah. It's stunning, was then and still is now, that at such a young age, he was able to articulate something very clearly. Like he went right at it. And he grew up in a household where the message was quite different. He was surrounded by people who gave him a message that was quite different, and yet he picked up on this very clearly. And so right from the time he was born, the elders that I knew told me, listen to your son when he first starts to speak, because he's gonna remember things from before he was born, and he's gonna express them. Listen carefully, because he's gonna. So this is the way I took this. I took this as guidance from my son on what to pay attention to. So that's why I studied the fort. So I understand the fort as a social spatial organizer in Canadian society, it teaches us that there are insiders in this society and there are outsiders. And insiders do certain things and outsiders do other things. And it's like separate realities. And this is considered to be naturalized and necessary, this divide. And it's been my argument that most of our institutions, including universities and schools, are based on this social spatial organizer. So universities are like forts. And because of my family background and the mixed heritage I have, I really wanted to bring attention to this logic, what I call colonial frontier logic, and expose its falsehoods, and really try to promote repair and renew the relationship on different terms based on my own ancestry and the things that I was taught, from people in my family. And so the research, though, I think early on as an academic, it was important for that critique to take on the form that it did. And I think it helped a lot of people to draw attention to that dynamic. But maybe about 5 years in, I kind of had an existential breakdown. Because I thought to myself, what if someone was to say to me, okay, Dwayne, forts, colonialism, all of that, you're very, it's very accurate and very important, but what should we do instead? And I realized at the time that I felt like I didn't have a very good answer for what to do instead. And so I would say slowly I started to leave the critique behind and turn my attention to research that had to do with how we might proceed differently on different terms. And so I think that's where, a lot of the work with elders, a lot of the work with holism, thinking about wisdom traditions, thinking about sacred ecology, thinking about treaty teachings, and all of that really being guided by a métissage sensibility.